What's up, world? I'm Cameron McKinney, and this is Pop Culture Spotlight, a podcast about the movie Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F. Here's a quick synopsis. Axel Foley, the wild detective from Detroit, returns to Beverly Hills to help his estranged daughter. The film stars Eddie Murphy, Taylor Page, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Kevin Bacon, Judge Reinhold, John Ashton, and Paul Reiser. Standout performances. Listen, I've already said everything I want to say on the great career of Eddie Murphy. I did a podcast on his entire career that I hope you go back in the show's archives and listen to. What I want to talk about right now is his fraught relationship with making sequels out of his hit movies. Let's first look at the non-Beverly Hills Cop movie sequels. Another 48 Hours, Nutty Professor to the Clumps. Two films that just aren't as good as the first ones, and fans don't even want to recognize them as sequels anymore. The answer for what is the best sequel that Eddie Murphy has been in is Shrek 2, and that's a voice role, so it's a different kind of a thing. For his live-action movies, he's had a tough time making sequels for his beloved characters. Let's look at the Beverly Hills franchise. The first sequel is decent, the action is better than the comedy, and that's not surprising given the fact that the director is Tony Scott, the man behind Top Gun. And Beverly Hills Cop 3 is the worst of the franchise and one of the worst sequels ever. Murphy seems disinterested in being the funniest person in America at that point. It's a bleak film, which is the opposite of what it's supposed to be. So because of that movie's ultimate failure, I can see why Murphy wanted to right that wrong and make another Beverly Hills Cop movie. Where we are at with legendary actors reprising famous roles is interesting. On one hand, Tom Cruise played Maverick again, and people ate that up. On the other hand, Michael Keaton returned as Batman again in The Flash, and it didn't move people enough to go to the movies. I'm interested to see how playing Beetlejuice works out for the actor. Murphy has made both of his legacy sequels with streaming services, Coming to America with Amazon, and now Beverly Hills Cop Axel F with Netflix. And I think that's a wise choice. These movies would not have performed as well as their predecessors, and all of the talk would have been about box office failures instead of the movies themselves. I personally really enjoyed Murphy playing this character again because you could tell he was enjoying it. I can't stress this enough. Eddie Murphy was and still is one of the most famous people on the planet, and we know that can take a toll on someone. For Murphy, fame forced him to change his signature laugh. The famous comedian told Kevin Pollowy of CBR, quote, "In the 80s, I was like, I don't want to be known for a laugh. That's all they did for an impression was that laugh. It was like, hey, you know what? I'm going to stop laughing. I forced myself to stop laughing, which is really an unnatural thing. You laugh and it's like I have to stop laughing like that, and now I don't laugh like that anymore." End quote. Murphy's co-star in this, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, in this movie is given a difficult task, being the young partner to an established movie star. Other cop films have a version of this character that comes in sequels. A modern example of this is Justin Long in Live Free, Die Hard, and I liked Levitt in this movie. He's an actor that's better than what he's given, absolutely, but he makes the most out of it. And I think in modern circles, Levitt is given this reputation as a serious actor, but this is a guy who was in a sitcom, Third Rock from the Sun. I remember him having a notable appearance in That 70s Show. Like, this guy is a funny guy, and I think he fits the humor that this movie in particular is going for. Taylor Page was the breakout star of Zola, and in this she plays Axel's daughter, and she made the most out of a thankless role in my opinion. Her whole arc as a defense attorney is way too clunky, and the fact that we don't know who her mom is just a bizarre choice. But it's tough to even talk about Levitt and Page in this movie because this is the Eddie Murphy showcase, and it's really interesting at this point in his career that Eddie Murphy wants to give a showcase like this, because Eddie Murphy is a figure who went away for a long period of time after a few of his movies didn't work out, and now to come back like this in a movie like this after doing Coming to America, then doing Beverly Hills Cop, this really feels like a full circle moment for Eddie Murphy wanting to reestablish himself as a major movie star. And in one sense, he really does that because he does carry the film. It really is wild, however, that it took this long to get Kevin Bacon in a movie with Eddie Murphy. These were huge figures of the 80s. Bacon is the villain of this movie, and he's fine. It's not his best villain role. That would be in X-Men First Class, a movie that he really doesn't get enough credit for. I mean, Kevin Bacon playing despicable characters is a great thing. And finally, you have Judge Reinhold and John Ashton returning as well, and I like them in these movies, but they've also done other work I'm fond of. Reinhold in Stripes and the Santa Claus films with Tim Allen, Ashton in Midnight Run and in Gone Baby Gone. Reinhold's Billy Rosewood is no longer the wild man he was in the original films, but it was good to see him nonetheless. And look, I understand bringing back all of the original characters. Paul Reiser comes back as well, but when you look at the Beverly Hills Cop franchise, it really is a one-man show. It's all about Eddie Murphy. So for them to be so invested in bringing back the original characters is an interesting choice, because you could have just done an entire movie without them and just brought back Eddie Murphy, and it would have felt like a Beverly Hills Cop movie, because Eddie Murphy is Beverly Hills Cop. Like what they did with Top Gun Maverick. I mean, really, the one big character that comes back is Maverick himself. He is the face of that movie. That's all you need in the Top Gun movies is Tom Cruise. And likewise, all you need in a Beverly Hills Cop movie is Eddie Murphy. He is the face of the franchise. Even more so, maybe, than Tom Cruise. Because maybe you could make the argument that Top Gun Maverick is Tom Cruise giving the mantle to Miles Teller. Who knows where the sequels will go. Maybe there is a successor. I don't believe this is a franchise that will have a successor. They're not going to make a sequel movie where Levitt's character is the face of the film. That's not going to happen. This is going to live and die with Eddie Murphy being the face of it. So before I get into Beverly Hills Cop Axel F, I do want to say I generally like this movie, and there's one helicopter sequence in particular I think is top notch. But I really struggle with how the movie tackles hot button issues. And I think a movie like this tackles those issues because that's their idea of modernizing the story. Oh, we can't just do what we did in the 80s where these movies are just a good time. We have to differentiate ourselves from those movies. And how this movie did that is weird to me. Beverly Hills Cop Axel F. In this film, they comment on how cops stick together even when they know one of them is dirty. And that's not something I want a Beverly Hills Cop movie to comment on, because I think it's just there to make you go, oh wow, these people have something really insightful to say. And what annoys me about that is I think something like that is in the plot to make you, the audience, go, wow, I'm really impressed. That is such a profound statement for a movie like this to comment on. And I think it almost belittles the matter that they're actually talking about. I know a lot of people have strong opinions on police men and women in today's modern era, but that doesn't need to be commented on a Beverly Hills Cop movie. Nobody is taking these movies seriously, and I'm annoyed that this movie kind of takes itself seriously. Because I don't know what the movie is doing that for otherwise. You're not going to get a real conversation going about cops because you watch Beverly Hills Cop Axel F. Nobody is going to take you seriously if you go, well, I saw this in Beverly Hills Cop Axel F. How do you feel about the matter? Absolutely no one is going to have a serious conversation about cops because of this movie. I think it's more interesting when the movie looks about the toll the job has had on Axel's life, how he can't retire because he's got nothing to look forward to. He's been selfish, he's been wild, he's been all about his job. That to me seems more realistic and more something that the movie can tackle. Like, I just think that policemen being dirty is too complicated to comment on a movie like Beverly Hills Cop Axel F. Like, I just don't think the movie should have gone there at all. And I watched Beverly Hills Cop 3 after I watched this movie, and that movie has a similar issue. It has this character who is the villain that everyone thinks is a good guy. Like, I get it. You want to do that because you think that's complicated, you think that's nuanced, you think that's never been done in a comedy like this. Like, yes, if you have something new to say about it that's interesting, that's heartfelt, go for it. But if you're just using this to say, look, we're really growing as a franchise in Beverly Hills Cop, I don't have any interest in you for that matter. I don't care your opinions on these kind of things. I don't want to say this to be belittling, but I just find you to be a silly movie, and I just want you to be a silly movie. I just want you to be fun and entertaining. I don't want you to say something about modern life that I haven't been able to describe myself. It just feels like comedies no longer think they can just be comedies. I mean, Superbad 2, if they made a Superbad 2, I mean, would they have to comment about the cops in those movies? No, they could just be silly and fun, because that's what Seth Rogen and Bill Hader were in that movie, silly and fun. Why can't Axel just be a silly and fun cop? We don't need to bring the real world into these movies, and that's what Beverly Hills Cop Axel F was attempting to do, and in my opinion, failed miserably. It's the aspect of the movie I didn't like, and it's the Kevin Bacon character, and I have no problems with Kevin Bacon's performance. It's just this idea of, oh, here's this dirty cop that everyone knows is dirty, but the only one who wants to call him out is Axel. And you can watch this movie and agree or disagree with me on this, but one thing I find with movies like this is both sides lose out on it. The newer audience doesn't connect with this new plot point that these filmmakers think is so profound, and then the older audiences go, this is not the Beverly Hills Cop I want. I'm kind of in that mode. Like, I don't want Beverly Hills Cop to be self-serious. I think that's the problem with Beverly Hills Cop 3, is it's so self-serious. It's so unfunny. Like, Eddie Murphy thinks he's being like a really dramatic cop character. That's not Eddie Murphy's strength. There's this one scene in the movie that really bothered me where Eddie Murphy's character is trying to tell John Ashton's character that Kevin Bacon is dirty and that he knows it, and he's basically saying, be a cop again. Like, that whole scene, that whole part of the movie was my least favorite, because this was just this movie trying to be somewhat serious, trying to say something about real life, trying to say something about modern cops, like, and it just all failed so miserably. But luckily enough, there's enough of that other stuff I really like. There is Eddie Murphy being really funny. There is that look of what this job cost him between him and his daughter. All of that stuff I find fascinating. I find realistic. I find it to be believable. It's the other stuff that I just think is reaching for a movie like this. Like, it's reaching for something like, see, this is why Axel F is different than the first two Beverly Hills Cop movie. And you don't want to be too different if you're this movie, because Beverly Hills Cop 3 is very different than the first Beverly Hills Cop, and that's not a good thing. Sometimes you can just be what you're supposed to be, and I feel like Axel F struggles with that at times. And it might have been in that same scene I'm describing, but there's one scene where Chief Taggart, that's John Ashton's character, says that he doesn't believe that Kevin Bacon's character is dirty because he was in basic training with him. Like, that's just not a nuanced take on cops being loyal to one another. That just feels like lazy, like a plot narrative. Again, it just feels like something that you want the audience to go, oh wow, Beverly Hills Cop Axel F is also a serious movie trying to comment on a sensitive subject matter, and I don't think anybody wants a movie like this to comment on, because we don't know how to comment on it, and unless you have something actually real to say about it, we're kind of sick and tired of hearing about it. Another thing about Beverly Hills Cop Axel F, it just feels like with the involvement of producer Jerry Bruckheimer and the naming of the movie after the main character, that this movie was aspiring to be Top Gun Maverick, and it's not that. It's decent. I now fully believe that Top Gun Maverick is the movie that everyone who wants to play a character again is chasing. Here's what Reese Witherspoon said to Patrick Ryan of USA Today about a potential Legally Blonde Free. Quote, I'm still hoping that Legally Blonde Free is gonna come together in the right way. It's just like Top Gun. They waited a long time to make another version of that movie, and I loved it. The nostalgia nostalgia piece they incorporated in it. So definitely that gave us a lot of inspiration about what we would want to do with Elle Woods and make sure we had all those same touchstones that mattered to people back then. End quote. I'm really interested to see if 10 years from now, people learn the right lessons from Top Gun Maverick and how to make a legacy sequel, because I think the lesson that Reese Witherspoon is talking about is to just give the people what they want. Make a Legally Blonde movie that feels like a Legally Blonde movie, that stays true to the franchise. And Beverly Hills Cop Axel F in some ways does that. It gives you funny Eddie Murphy, and we all want to see funny Eddie Murphy, but then in the ways that it tries to be new, just kind of falls flat to me. It feels emotionally untrue. The nostalgia part of what she was saying is really interesting, because can you just recreate that nostalgia by dressing up as the character? Like, you see Tom Cruise play Maverick, and you're just brought back to him playing Maverick in the original Top Gun. That's what every actor is going for. They want to be celebrated for what they've done, and they also want to be celebrated for what they are doing. And then I think the real question is, after you make a legacy sequel like this 30 years later after the last film, can you continue to make sequels? What will happen when Top Gun Maverick eventually has a sequel? Will people care as much? Will the movie be as good? Because so much thought and effort went into this. I bet the last 30 years, Eddie Murphy has been mulling about when he's going to come back to play Axel Foley. He's been thinking about it. Now, if there's only like a 3-year period before the next movie, will that movie be any good? And I hate to say it, I think the answer to that question is ultimately going to be no. I don't think that these legacy sequels should be used to revitalize the franchise. I think they kind of should be a swan song for these beloved characters, especially when you're using words like nostalgia. Like, nostalgia can only go so far if you keep playing this character over and over again. When there's a long absence of the character, then I think it's appropriate. Listen, I want a Top Gun Maverick sequel because I want to see Miles Teller play Goose again, but I have no idea if that sequel is going to be any good. I do know this, it's not going to be as popular as Top Gun Maverick. I don't think people will care as much. For that movie, there was a real, I want to see a movie like that I haven't seen in decades. I have missed the Top Gun franchise, and I want it back badly. I think reviewers have been kind to films like Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F, because of that nostalgia, because they've been missing Eddie Murphy in their lives. Anything he's going to give them where he's going to try to be the funniest person on the planet, you're going to have feeling towards. I just don't think making another 2 to 3 more Beverly Hills Cop movies starring Eddie Murphy is the right thing to do here. Now, it's probably the avenue they're going to go down, but I don't want to see Eddie Murphy play this character 2 to 3 more times. I want the character to end on a high note, and I think Axel F is a pretty good high note to end on. It's 1,000 times better than Beverly Hills Cop 3. It's not as good as the original. I think it's right up there with number 2. It's a solid movie. It's a good time. It's fun. It's entertaining. You watch the movie and you remember that Eddie Murphy is super hilarious. Ultimately, though, there's going to be a sequel. I just think they left the door open. We don't know who the daughter's mother is. That's going to be something that they're going to reveal in the next movie. There's going to be more crimes to solve. Eddie Murphy is going to work with Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character again. I think the next movie, if you want it to be really good, introduce a memorable villain. Kevin Bacon was fine in this movie. I just didn't really like the character. How about just have a bad guy who's a bad guy? Not a cop who's secretly a bad guy, just an old-fashioned bad guy played by a really good actor. What I liked about Kevin Bacon being in this movie is that they brought in a significant figure from the 1980s and put him in the signature franchise from the 1980s. Continue to do that. Make a Beverly Hills Cop movie that has Steve Martin and Martin Short. Like, that's what I want to see. That's what I like about Stranger Things, is that they bring in old-timey actors to fit into their nostalgia world. That, I think, is effective. That's what I liked about Kevin Bacon being in this movie. Do more of that if you're going to make a sequel. I view Beverly Hills Cop Axel F as a success story. I really like the movie. Again, the helicopter sequence is really good. I wish there was more of that in this movie. That's where Joseph Gordon-Levitt really shines alongside Eddie Murphy. The two of them, that is the best scene of the movie, and I think that's the scene that most people will be talking about for a long time. I'll end on this. It does seem like Eddie Murphy is not done playing his iconic characters. It was recently announced there's going to be Shrek 5 with Mike Myers, Cameron Diaz, and Eddie Murphy returning, and Eddie Murphy has talked about a Donkey Solo movie. So Eddie Murphy playing his beloved characters is going to continue. I just hope he continues to find success doing it, because the saddest thing is watching him play a character he's played before and it be in a really bad movie. I don't ever want to see that again. Thanks for listening to this edition of Pop Culture Spotlight. I'm Cameron McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Thursday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I highly recommend you check out the movie Beverly Hills Cop Axel F. Next week on the podcast, I'm talking about the horror film A Quiet Place Day One, starring Lupita Nyong'o, Joseph Quinn, and Alex Wolff. So tune into that, and please rate, review, and subscribe.